Welcome, everybody, to a Good Story podcast. Today, we're going to be talking exclusively about stories from Africa or about Africans. We'll start off with the richest man in history, Mansa Musa, his Hajj to Mecca, how he flooded the gold market, devalued it, and how he literally put Mali on the map. There's actually a picture of him with a gold nugget sitting on a map. Next, we'll cover an African man who became famous not in Africa, but in Japan. A black samurai in Japan, how the Portuguese brought him over, how the Japanese became obsessed with him, and how he became a samurai. And lastly, we'll cover the tragic history of Rhodesia, of the white rulers, the white landowners, the conflict with black Rhodesians, colonization, two communist-backed groups, one by the Chinese, one by the Soviets, how that led to chemical warfare, and how the UN made Rhodesia an illegal government. All right, let's jump into it.
All right. Hey, everybody. So today I'm going to first start us off. I'm going to start us off with Mansa Musa. And he, more specifically, not really about him, but his Hajj to Mecca and all the interesting things he got involved in. So Mansa Musa, Mansa literally just means king or ruler, or like sultan. So he was the ruler, and he takes the throne in 1312 AD. In the early 14th century, and he's the ninth Mansa of the Empire of Mali. So he takes over this big empire, and he takes it over from his predecessor, who was obsessed with the Atlantic Ocean and believed there was something beyond the Atlantic Ocean. So he actually abdicated his throne so he could take a bunch of ships and, slaves, women and stuff, and travel across the Atlantic. And they were never heard from again. No one knows if they made it. There's theories that some people believe they made it to the Americas, but there's no proof of that. So anyway, so he takes over the throne.
Theories that the Templars made it to America. That's theories that everybody made it to America.
Oh yeah, but I feel like if you bring all that gold and like all those slaves and everything, I feel like there'd be something somewhere someone would.
Also, unlike the Templars, this guy was obsessed with. He believed there was something beyond the Atlantic Ocean. Turns out he was right. Who knows if he lived to actually see what was beyond the Atlantic Ocean? But I
mean, one storm, it's all over.
Yeah, I mean, he was only I can't remember when the Vikings made it there, so he wasn't that far off in the time period. Anyway, so Mansa Musa takes over, and Mali is already the biggest producers of gold in the world, they believe. And then he goes on to conquer 24 cities, and he annexes or takes over Timbuktu and Gao, which is really important because they're mostly, they're city-states really, but they are important stops for merchants, for trade, for ivory. So now he has those two commercial centers under his wings, and he gets trade routes all over, and he becomes what is believed to be the richest man in human history. Move over Jeff Bezos. Although no one knows for a fact how to calculate his wealth, so it's just based on the stories. But yeah, he was definitely one of the richest people in history, maybe the richest man in all of history.
I don't know if that's very accurate. Okay, so I only say that because I recently listened to something about them trying to estimate the value of the Dutch East India Trading Company, and people were saying, "Oh, it's the richest company to ever exist." But if you calculate it in today's dollars, it's not really. It's just hard to take something from the old world and pull into the new world and compare it apples to apples just because of the difference. It's size of the global economy back then. It's just so much smaller.
And different things in different periods of time also have different values. It's just
exactly. Yeah. It's hard to properly compare it. You could compare it as a part of the global GDP back then, which maybe you could say then yes, but as part of comparing wealth today versus then, it's so different. I think they said the Dutch East India Trading Company would be worth $4 billion today, which as far as a company like the stock exchange, almost nothing.
Well, ye two of little faith. We'll get to the stories.
I know some of the stories.
Ye
so
of
continue.
little faith. All right. So this man was super rich. We don't know if he was the richest man. We don't know if, as Jared and Joe want to portray him as, a poor beggar on the street. But we do know
He's not you, Bender.
he's not me. That is true. He's not as handsome. Well, we actually have no pictures, so no one knows. But it doesn't matter. When you're the king, you can get all the women, so it doesn't matter.
I say,
But
if you're
anyways,
the richest man in the world who has ever existed, apparently, you can get women whenever you want, probably.
Yeah, probably.
You also wrecked the world economy. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
So he liked to show his wealth, and skipping ahead a little bit, he built a huge mosque in Timbuktu, and also is credited with introducing sort of like formal education. Obviously, there was education of like oral traditions being passed down and whatnot, and local traditions. But he was the one who was like said, "We're going to build all these schools. I'll fund them, universities." So he made Timbuktu this. It was already a great place of learning, but he made it like this center place where all these Arabic people would go, all these people from Africa would go to learn there, and he really put West Africa on the map. But that came later. Before that, he's a devout Muslim, and he decides, you know what? I'm making the Hajj. Every Muslim has to make the Hajj. I'm making the Hajj. But he decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring 60,000 men and 12,000 slaves. Each of these slaves is going to carry 4 pounds of gold. I'm going to bring 80 camels that are holding probably up to 300 pounds of gold each. I'm going to bring, the people, my entertainers, my juggler, the juggler type people, all of that. I'm going to bring all the people that know how to take care of camels, the overseers. I'm going to dress them in the finest Persian silks. I'm going to dress them even the slaves were dressed in gold. They had gold on them. And I'm going to pay for all their food, all for the transportation, everything. That's all me. And along the way on the Hajj from Mali, he decides there's traditions that have been passed down. I want to preface this by saying most of the history comes from either documents found in Timbuktu, but were written after his life. Also, oral traditions that were passed down by people who traveled in the caravan or saw the caravan or were in Cairo and stuff and Mecca. And then they later told like a historian, like, hey, this is what I saw. And they wrote it down. So they don't actually, obviously, there's no like slave that was in his group that was like, I should write this down. Like, this is pretty neat.
Can't read or write, but I'll figure something out.
I'll figure it out. I'll draw me some pictures in the sand. That will last forever. So it said that he built a mosque every Friday. Now he traveled over a year to get to Mecca. So every Friday he built a mosque wherever he was, gave all the money to the poor, traded with people. He gets to Cairo. He's hanging out with the leader there. He's just handing out gold to everybody in Cairo. And what ends up happening while he's doing the Hajj is he gives so much gold for souvenirs, but also as gifts to poor people. He ends up causing a 10 to 12 year, causes the gold market to crash for 10 to 12 years.
Well, think about it this way. It's like that was the currency back then, essentially. Gold is the standard for currency. If you flood the market with a bunch of currency, it's worth a lot less. So, like, it's maybe hard to think now, but he had so much gold, like, for his pocket money. This is just money he just carried around with him. It's his walking around money that he wrecked the global economy by flooding it with gold so quick. It took forever to recover. So, like, you'd see something in the market that say it cost like an eighth of an ounce of gold back like one day. He spent so much gold, next day it'd be maybe 2 ounces, 3, because like it would first affect the cities he was in, because this wasn't a global economy back then, or not anywhere near on the scale it is today. So it took a while for these effects to kind of spider web out. So the areas that were hit first and really hard were the areas he started traveling to. And so it took a while for it to reach Europe, but it slowly would expand out as this gold like started making its way into more people's hands. Like it had long lasting effects because like there's no like immediate correction. Like this took a while for it to like encompass the known world back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's almost like he's the richest man in history, man. It's crazy.
Nah. I mean, as a percentage of the global wealth back then versus percentage now, maybe, but like total wealth now.
All right. So Jared is still not a believer, even though all the things he just said are very true. He ends up causing like hyperinflation all around the world because that people are like, to buy goods, you have to literally pay a bunch of money. Like it's just like he's thrown off the market so much. It's the only time in human history that a singular man, has controlled the entire gold market. He by himself controlled the entire gold market and dictated.
Yeah, but was it intentional?
It wasn't intentional.
Oh, we'll get to that later, Joe. We get to that later. Like, get in your head of yourself there, Joe. All right. Was it intentional? So he's got the entire gold market at his fingertips. And some people do say when he came back from Mecca on his way back, he bought a bunch of gold at high interest rates so he could sort of balance it out a little bit. But there is a bunch of historians who don't believe he went there because of Islamic devotion. I think it was probably both personally, but I think they think he went there to just basically show off. Oh, look at Mali, look at West Africa. Like, we're putting us on the empire on the map, because no one really paid attention to them in Europe, even though they're really close by. No one paid attention to them in Europe. No one in the Arabic world, even though they were a Muslim, empire, no one really paid attention to them. Obviously, you have all these other, empires and stuff over in the Mediterranean, Middle East, etc. And so no one really cared. So people were like, oh, he literally just did it to show off, like, look at how rich I am. Because you can't really justify all the stuff he did just as like, oh, he's a devout Muslim. Yeah, building the mosque, giving the poor. But like, he ends up flooding the market. People actually think Cairo was the center of at least in the Middle East, the gold market. And everyone would go there and trade gold stuff. People believe now that he went there and purposely, because he really did his most damage in Cairo, flooded Cairo. So then the new market would become either Gao, that city he conquered, or Timbuktu, those two cities he conquered. He thought people would have to shift away, and because it was just too plentiful in Cairo and that area now. So some people think like that was a tricky ploy by him to be like, oh, I'm just giving away gold to everybody. But then it actually would have the effect of making the Empire of Mali much more powerful, much more important. So
I don't think it's that purposeful. Like, because it's that's kind of like a genie in the bottle situation. Like, once the cap's off, you're done. Like, once that gold is in the market, it's in the market. You can't get it back. There's nothing he could trade that was a sufficient value to get that gold back. Maybe like land, but like otherwise he's just flooding the market with more gold. Like, it's hard.
Yeah, but Jared, if he's the richest man in the world, then he doesn't care about throwing away money.
Well, no, like it's the idea of like trying to devalue your own currency to try to like make trade a little bit better, so you can get like whatever you're producing, you get more gold for whatever you're producing. But I don't really see that his economy is like a large like production hub.
Well, I mean, Timbuktu, like I said, did become a huge part of the Islamic world, and maybe less so in Europe. But I mean, as you said, even Europe figured out about him, and they put him on a map. They used to not put West Africa like any details about it. The Catalan Atlas has him sitting on a throne in West Africa holding gold. So yeah, he actually was so rich, and his stories were so legendary that they actually were like, oh, we're gonna put this guy with gold on a map and actually show like the Mali Empire. Now, maybe it wasn't intentional. I don't know. I mean, that's just a theory. Maybe it's 2 for 1. Maybe it makes him popular or whatever. But Jared, there's these still to this day in Mali, there's these can't remember their name, but there's singers that pass down like historical stories, though, right? They're traditional singers, and they never sing about him. And the reason apparently is because they're like, this guy wasted all of our empire's all these empires' resources outside of the empire. He could have, he did a lot, but look at how much he wasted. Yeah. So I don't know, Jared. I think he just threw away, like, oh, let me just throw away money and I'll crash the market. And people are like, well, it would have been better if you just spent that money here.
But it would have crashed their own market. Like, it's hard to put.
He could have invested in infrastructure projects. That could have been something.
Yes, right, but Joe. Like back then,
2024.
it's difficult to do that back then, like properly. Like What he
What?
could have done.
He built a bunch of schools and university and mosques and all that stuff. He brought a bunch of people back from
If
the
you could
Islamic
build
world.
a church or a mosque every Friday,
Yes,
you could
but,
build
like,
a school.
Yes, but that only goes so far. Like when you're the government's
It
the only
goes
thing
all the way to
producing-
Mecca from Mali.
No, I'm saying, like, in a circular economy like that, if the government's the one producing everything, it's hard for the people to, like, build their own business up. Like, infrastructure is one thing.
Well, they're not capitalists. Yeah, of course, building their own business. They're like still tribal people too, and
Yeah,
stuff.
well,
It's
this
not
is like
that,
this is like
but-
mercantilism is still like a thing in Europe at this point. Like it's just like
Exactly.
starting. Yeah, it's.
But what I'm saying is, why couldn't he pay for like, oh, hey, people from Europe, like all around the world, I
Yes,
will pay you to come here and build stuff, or like all that money he wasted.
Can you remind
Yes,
the,
no,
of the time
I'm
period?
not arguing that
again?
he wasted it. It's just like that's not his solution either. The solution is to dole it out slowly over time. Like I like to think of the diamond market as a good example. One company owns like 90-something% of all the diamonds in the world. They dole them out slowly over time to keep the value of diamonds from spiking crazy,
Of
like
course.
gold. So
So you're
why
saying
not?
he then, but that counters your argument. You're saying that you don't think that he wanted to crash the Cairo market, but there he was throwing away. He wasn't going, oh, a little bit.
He could have just been extravagant. He could have been like just trying to live this lavish life.
Extravagant, just giving away gold for no
Yeah.
reason, all over.
Rich people like that are crazy, especially in the ancient world. Oh my god!
Yeah. So wait, Jared, is he super duper rich, or
Yes.
is he? Oh, so you do admit he is super.
I mean, he's rich, but the wealthiest person to ever live, I don't think so.
Getting
Top
back
10,
to
Jared.
how he could have helped his people. The ancient world, infrastructure is how you stimulate the economy. What do you think all the building projects in Rome were? It's
Yes, but all that
the pyramids,
all that
those
was
provided jobs. They provided like
well,
stimulus. to the
Rome was mostly slave labor, but yes, like a lot of
No, the pyramids actually weren't built by slave labor.
Yeah, take that, Jared.
They actually were built by people that were like really well respected and they got
skilled.
to get
Yeah.
buried next to the tomb.
Yeah, yeah, Jared.
It was kind of like you worked in shifts. It was like, all right, I'm gonna go work on the pyramids for like 4 months, get housing and feed and pay, and then I'm gonna go back to my farm. It was. We don't think they were slaves anymore. Actually, they were respected people of society, and it's the same thing. You see it all across the ancient world too. There are some slave labor, but infrastructure was important. If he had invested in maybe building an aqueduct or something, that money could have gone a long way. But instead, he decided to build churches on the way to Mecca.
Yeah, but the whole idea is like he couldn't have spent it all at once at his place in his own country either to crash the economy as well.
No, he didn't have to spend all of it. We're not saying he had to spend all of it, but he was literally had every single 12,000 slaves carried 4 pounds of gold.
Yes, but okay. Think what happened.
He didn't have to give that all away.
Think what happened. Okay, so think what happened to the global economy about what he like. That was the global economy back then, and he spent. Imagine all that in one country. What that would have done.
Right, but I'm saying you already said it. He doesn't have to spend it all at once.
It's essentially
too small.
Yes, that's what yes. So you're agreeing with me.
No, you're agreeing with me.
No.
What do you mean?
No.
Yes, he wouldn't spend it all, but me and Joe said he built infrastructure, and then
things you can do.
It's the thing you could spend it on the most. You could buy land with it. You could do other stuff. You could invest in the military. Go on some sort of.
He wouldn't flood his own country's market, but he probably wanted to do that to Cairo, which is why he was doing that. How can you say he's extravagant in Cairo, but in his own country?
You don't know he did that on purpose.
No, of course we don't know any of this. Half these podcasts we're like, we don't know. Like, we're just guessing here. Joe once had a guy say. He said he saw a guy turn into a werewolf. He's like, God strike me dead if this didn't happen. Like, come on.
No, and also you got to remember too, and you're dealing with ancient sources. They don't really know. Like you said, it's a lot of oral tradition. For all we know, this guy was more calculated, and they just kind of, came off and the sources as more carefree, or he was just a bumpkin and just kind of didn't know what he was doing. It's. You can never.
The reason I also don't believe that is like he built, like I said, he literally is introduced like formal education to like West Africa and made it like the hub of the Islamic world for like scholarship and stuff in Timbuktu and all that stuff. Like, I don't. Is he like? How can he be a buffoon? Like, he left the empire in good state. There was no real turmoil as far as we know, although his descendants lost it pretty quickly and it split up. But
That's pretty common.
Yeah, it's very common. But anyways, that's what happens when you just give it to your kids or your family, and you're like, all right, you take it. Like meritocracy, when that doesn't exist, it's like, your empires are gonna fall apart.
Anyway, for you to decide,
the listener, decide.
The listeners, was he, mastermind, or was he just, wanting to spend his money?
Well, we can all agree he was very, very rich and probably the richest man in the world, right, Jared?
Back then, yes. I'm not saying ever.
All right, not ever. Not ever. At the time. Top 10, Jared.
Again, it's hard to judge apples to apples.
Oh my God! Just give me an answer, for the love of God, Jared.
I don't know, because you can't really judge it back then. Like it's hard to quantify wealth now versus back then, because the pie is so much bigger. Like,
all right. I'll take that as a yes.
Okay, I'll go next.
All right.
I kind of cheated. Well, I didn't cheat. It's a story about a man from Africa, but it also includes Asia as well. It brings in our Asian.
Oh my! I think I know what you're doing.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm doing, and it's okay.
Why does everything you do always involve anime? If I'm thinking of the right thing.
No. Okay, yeah, you're thinking right, but it's not. That's not why I picked this. I just thought it was really cool. I actually have never seen Afro Samurai, so just throwing that out there. Not that I think it's bad. I just have never watched it.
Oh no, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the new one. But anyway, go on. We're getting off track.
Yeah. Anyway, so and during like the 1500s and like the 1579 is when we think that this occurred. Well, it's when we think that this man from Africa arrived in Japan. Now, during this time period, Japan and China are kind of at odds with each other. So trade between them, you can't trade with each other. So what the Europeans are doing, what the Portuguese are doing during this time period, is they're basically going to China, buying a bunch of silks, and then going to Japan and trading it there. They're being the intermediaries between the two powers that don't want to trade with each other, and they're making a tidy profit on it. And so during this time period, the Jesuits are coming in too to try to convert everybody in Japan to Christianity, as Christians do, go everywhere and try to convert everybody, which is not, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing. I'm just saying that's just part of history. But whenever they get during this time period, they get to Japan. The Jesuits have brought people from Africa as servants, or they call them a page. Our sources call them a page, but I don't think the Japanese really understood the role of African people in Western society. Anyway, when the Jesuits get to Japan in 1579, they kind of set up their little church. And then there gets this outcry around the local towns that there's this man here who is from Africa who came with the Jesuits, and they'd never seen Japanese people had never seen an African man. So he becomes so popular that people eventually just go to the church and break down the door to see him, because they want to see this man that is a foot taller than the average Japanese person and has black skin. They've never seen this before. And so they bring him to Obu Nagunaga. Do you know how to pronounce his name? Oda Nabunagi. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. Anyway, they bring him to like the head warlord of the time. And he doesn't believe what he's seeing. He doesn't think he's a real person. He actually asks him to remove his clothes and scrub himself to prove that he's actually black, like has black skin. And so they do it. And supposedly at this point, he receives his only recorded name in history that we have. And it's his Japanese name. It's called Yasuke. And he becomes really popular in Japan, and the Oda Nobunaga, I remember how to pronounce his name, Oda Nobunaga. basically keeps him as a retainer and trains him as a samurai. And it's thought that he saw battle in the fall of the Takeda clan, and eventually he was there when Oda Nobunaga eventually committed seppuku. So for about a year, between 1981 or 1581 and 1582, he served as an actual Yasuke served as a samurai in Oda Nobunaga's army. And he even got like the full rights and privileges. Like he was given a katana, or like a ceremonial katana, and a little plot of land to live on. But after Oda Nobunaga lost the war in Japan, he ended up going back to the Jesuits. Supposedly, we don't really have any solid sources on this. But supposedly, the enemy after Oda Nobunaga was defeated said, "Well, you're not really Japanese, so just go back to the Christians." And he did, and so that's where the story ends. We don't really know what happened to the guy that was named Yasuke after this point. But for a year, there was an African samurai in Japan. Now, how often he saw battle is up for debate. Honestly, we don't really know a whole lot about his training or anything like that. But we do know that he was part of Oda Nobunaga's retainers, and that he possibly saw battle and some of the most important battles in that war. So yeah, pretty interesting guy.
Yeah, they got a new
Even
show
when we
on
have to pick an
Netflix.
African country, Joe still picks Asia.
What are you talking about? I never pick Asia.
You're right. He always picks Europe. I was
Yeah.
gonna say he's branching out by picking Asia.
A little bit.
I was trying to include two areas we don't really talk about that much.
Nah, that's a great story. I just love history. How they're just like he just was like, all right, he's from Africa. He comes a samurai, all that stuff. Goes in the wars, and then he just shows up at the Jesuits. He's like, all right, I'm done. I had my fun, guys. It's time for me to go back.
He didn't have anywhere else to go.
Samurai.
What's interesting about him too is he spoke a lot with Oda Nobunaga, and they think that he had to have learned Japanese at some point because we have no records of Oda Nobunaga speaking like Portuguese or any African language. So he had to have learned Japanese at some point, or he had a translator, but it's more likely that he could talk to him in some way.
Learn Japanese that fast, huh?
Yeah.
I also like how the enemy was like, well, you're not really Japanese, so we don't really know what to do with you. So
yeah, it was said like the enemy general called him. He's like, this man is like an animal, but he's not Japanese. So send him to the Christians.
Oh, Japan.
Yeah.
Never fails. But he's the long description, but he's not Japanese.
Yeah.
All right, get out of here. Skedaddle on it. I thought you were going to say when he scrubbed his skin and turned out he was a white guy in disguise. Like, I got you guys.
They thought he was a Portuguese man that had like dyed his skin with charcoal or something.
Oh, very sneaky, huh? Yeah, that's crazy. He went all the way to Africa to Japan, and isolated country, pretty much. And
talking about how connected the world trade systems are, he was a part of just a trading mission that happened to have missionaries on it. And the fact that he was just tall and no one had seen somebody like that in that part of the world before, he just became a celebrity like overnight. It was.
I guess people got over white people. I guess white people weren't that impressive at that point. They were like, we've seen enough of you.
Yeah, and they're about the same size. I mean, they're not like super like that much taller than the average white person wasn't that much taller than the average Asian person at this time.
Yeah, they're not a bunch of
back
Norwegians,
then.
a bunch of Portuguese.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Maybe if they had the blonde hair and blue eyes, but
maybe.
Anyway,
yeah.
Well, my part of history is much more recent than both of y'all's.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Yeah. Kind of spans over the course of a little while, though. I mean, it all kind of started in the 1890s when British started settling Africa, and one of their colonies was called Rhodesia, kind of central South Africa, kind of that area.
I know where this is going.
Spoiler alert, doesn't end well for anybody.
No, it doesn't.
When the British are involved, does it ever?
It doesn't.
Not even for them.
No, I know. All
Yeah,
the
but-
wars they won almost always hurt them in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this story's no exception. Oh, should we?
Oh yeah.
How much time we got left? Should we start a new one?
It said it's unlimited minutes.
Oh,
We
it
have
is?
time. We've removed the 40-minute time limit on your group meeting.
Hey.
Love it. Thank you.
Anyway, so obviously British colony, a lot of settlers went to like Central South Africa to settle there, so it had a very large white population area, kind of like and so like they had like kind of an agreement with like Great Britain that eventually they would be granted their like independence, kind of like Australia was. Like so that was kind of the accepted idea. But after World War II, things got shooken up a little bit. Whole world's kind of like turned on its head, and so Britain refused to like honor that agreement, and they kind of like wanted to like I guess wash their hands of their ties to some of their colonies. Like, and that was kind of the general trend in Europe, like in general this time. Like they wanted to, like a lot of places wanted to decolonize like Africa. So this is just another one of the many countries that it happened to happen to. It's just this one was known because it was created a little bit of a conflict. So in about this is obviously a little bit later, in the 1950s, Southern Rhodesia united with two other small countries to try to like strengthen up their like their position. But like it kind of like it did so for a little while. Like the Rhodesians were like the Rhodesians, the white Rhodesians in power were worried that they were going to be removed and like would lose their land, lose their power like in the area and like be essentially kicked out just because that was kind of what's happening with the rest of Africa. Like similar things were happening in the Congo and it worried them. So they elected Winston Field to power, and so to try to like stabilize things, did not have that the desired effect. There were movements all around Rhodesia and a couple surrounding countries for they're like kind of like seeing some of these more like black rule like movements try to like oust the white like Rhodesians from power, and so it's really broken down into two different movements. It's the I'm going to be butchering a bunch of names, so just wait. The Zapu and the Zinpa were the Soviet-backed ones. The Zapu were the politicians. The Zinpa was considered their military. Those were the Soviets. And the other ones were the Chinese-backed ones. And these were the ZANU.
Our good friends, the Chinese.
And the
Forgot to
Zanla.
mention.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we will shill.
We will shill.
That comes later. So, obviously, getting a little bit of backing from the communists never really hurt. So it helped give them more legitimacy and obviously more training. The Chinese actually trained the Zanla like in guerrilla warfare, which is coming to play later. So in 1964, they believe that's kind of when the war started. When which group was it that killed that guy? I don't know. One of the groups killed a white farmer, like and so that's what believed to have started the war. So
I'm sorry, just the way you phrased that. And then one of the groups killed a white farmer.
Yes. Yes. Well, they were, I mean, I guess you could say wildly unpopular between the white landowners just because of they were a little bit worried about getting killed and removed from power. So
Yeah.
you could say they were a little bit worried. But so like and after this happened, there's two other countries that kind of joined them earlier. They decided to split and go their own ways, which was not good for Rhodesia. It kind of like hurt them as far as like their stability in the region, because at this time the world was not like what was going on. The British actually did not recognize Rhodesia as a country, so they created an embargo around the whole place. And Rhodesia's only ally was South Africa, who sent them guns, supplies, that kind of stuff, kind of acting as like middlemen for Rhodesia. So they were being given the Rhodesian government was being given supplies by them, and then kind of all of the opposing militaries, the Zinpa and the Zanla, were given guns and weapons by the communists, Russia or China, depending on which group it was. Um, so obviously some battles were going on. The first really recognized one was in 1966, where the Rhodesian military killed 7 of the Zanlas, which is the Chinese group. It's really kind of sparked the war into like full tilt. It really like in those 1960s, there was kind of like sporadic battles here and there, and then like in the 1970s, China and the Soviets started training their forces more and more and more, and like really escalating things. And they did 2 things. They didn't just train them militarily; they trained them politically. Because so they'd make sure the African forces would go to towns and villages and like be sure to like spread the message of why they're fighting, that kind of stuff. Try to gather support from like the surrounding areas to try to really flip it. Not only like make it kind of like seen as like a war of oppression, kind of. So that's what they really push for. And then what's this guy's name? I'm gonna butcher a lot of these names.
It's okay. I stumbled over Oda Nobunaga's name way longer than I should have.
First name's easy, Robert, but his last name Mugani, head of the Zani, which is the Soviet ones. He was released from prison in 1974. He was one of the people that they captured early on in the war. The Rhodesians captured, but in 1975, Mozambique
Breaks
and Angola.
free.
No, he was set free. You've seen as a political prisoner, so Rhodesia tried to release him, try to garner some goodwill. Obviously, didn't happen. In 1975, though, Mozambique and Angola gained their independence from Portugal. And so, like, just like that, like the Rhodesians started fighting a 3-front war. Like the guerrillas were like running in and out of like another country, and now that these other countries like had declared their independence from Portugal, now it's on all sides essentially, except for South Africa as the only buffer. But
So they all decided to join in and fight Rhodesia.
Pretty much like F these guys, yeah.
Right after getting independence. Okay, I didn't know that.
Not the countries themselves didn't really, but they like sympathized with the guerrillas, so they let them use their borders as like a place to like go like attack, go back,
okay, yeah.
train, recruit, all that kind of stuff.
Kind of sounds like Pakistan.
What, Bender? There's no modern equivalence to that.
I'm kidding. Saudi Arabia. Go on, Jared.
Well, therefore, Rhodesia's kind of like facing more threats, became far more militarized, like far more militarized. At the end of the late in the end of the war, they actually started using chemical warfare, but we'll get to that later.
I mean, if you're fighting a 3-front war, I think anything goes.
It's like last ditch. Oh my gosh! Like, it's worth looking up at some point. But if you look up some of the what some of the civilians did to survive is crazy. Like, they would like all the homemade like weapons and things they'd make. Like, it's crazy. Like, the government would issue the civilians like AKs and FALs. And they would like take their Jeeps or it's probably like whatever vehicles they had, and they would like remove doors and set up machine guns on the side of the doors of like these regular cars. They would like crazy stuff. Like these civilians would actually make themselves. But anyway, it got pretty crazy. Like Rhodesia, like in fact, started even like doing airborne attacks into these other countries to try to cross the borders and try to prevent like the recruiting and training. Like they'd have paratroopers like land in these even foreign countries to try to fight guerrillas, which crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it all kind of came to a head in 1977 when the UN announced the Rhodesian government is illegal. And so it kind of like emboldened the guerrillas. And so they got more recruits. There were more attacks. There were a lot more landmines and made roads. Pretty crazy war zone, like the whole country. And the Zerpa, which is the Soviet one, I believe, shot down 2 passenger planes, like 2 like passenger aircrafts in 1978 and 1979. And so with that, the embargo going on, Rhodesia was crippled. The people were like constant threat. And so essentially they're like the Rhodesian government, like say, okay. What we'll do is we'll have an election. Like we'll have we agreed to like have an election, and essentially Abu Maserera was a bishop who was elected as the first president. Maserera or something like that.
Mozzarella.
Yeah, so he's elected as the first president.
I like Abu Mozzarella.
Mozzarella. Anyway.
No, the Italians took over. When did that happen?
They were the dark horse in this race.
What's
But
gonna go?
yeah, it then became it was called Zimbabwe Rhodesia. But unfortunately, the guerrillas refused to recognize this, and they continued to keep fighting. So even after this, like they just refused to recognize it. So international sanctions kind of kept going, but in 1979 there were peace talks held in Europe. They're like, okay, we need to put an end to this because it looks bad for the world. So everyone kind of went to Europe, and the U.S., the Britons agreed to foot the bill for essentially the redistribution of the land. So they said, okay, well, we'll buy the land from all the white landowners and we'll redistribute everything, the whole country. So
How did that work out?
Yeah, that sounds
Not
great
well.
when Europe does that in the past. That
especially paying off Soviet and Chinese backed militias, but yes.
yeah.
Which, I mean, to be fair, the Rhodesians, they had some chemical warfare going on too. I think this is, yeah, the most difficult part about researching this is like pretty much everything I read was so biased to one side or the other, just kind of like crazy bias to one side or the other. It was hard. It was really hard. Tried hard to find like non-biased facts. Like it was tough.
Yeah.
Because I guess it's because it's more recent history. Maybe I'm not sure.
Well, also you got the idea of like white people having power in Africa, which obviously is not white. You know, that's African like black land, and being like, oh, the white people have all the land, all the power, but at the same time, it's like, man, you throw out all the farm. Well, I'll let you get to that, but you throw out people who actually know how to farm the land, like you're setting yourself up for a huge failure. Like, look at what happened to Russia and the Ukraine. Look at North Korea. Yeah, when they took all the farmers, like they're like, yeah, you work in factory now or whatever. And it's like, who is gonna feed people?
Yeah, it never ends well. But again, like at this point, like the UN was just trying to get things to end, so they were like pretty much wanting to throw money at to fix it.
Why is the UN backing the commies though? Shouldn't the US in the Cold War be full on like, no, we won't make any deals with these guys?
There's not a third option though here. It's kind of the problem. It's like this communist or this communist, which would you prefer? They were more focused on the fact that they wanted democratic elections over the fact that they wanted like a communist versus non-communist, which they eventually kind of got the democratic election thing to happen.
This had to be before Reagan.
Yeah, this was like late 70s, but anyway, the final election was between three people. It was
I'm joking, Jimmy. You're a good person. Not a great president.
Yeah, it was Tongugara, Mugabe, and Smith. Those are the three people running for president. If you can guess which one's which.
I'm guessing Smith came out on top, huh?
I was gonna say Smith sounds like a winner.
Vote for Smith.
Well, one of the guys mysteriously died in a car crash. The first guy, Tongugara, died in a car crash mysteriously, and then he was actually replaced by Nkomo, and so. The funny thing is, Mugabe won though, and country was still torn up. Clashes still happened. Like there were still like conflicts here and there because obviously, like you have essentially three parties fighting for power. Over like none of them are happy. Like it's still a mess. In fact, it came to a head in 1984 when a bunch of these African troops were trained by North Korea. Yeah, go figure. And they were deployed to like a stronghold to try to like tamp down all of these like little clashes, and essentially thousands died over the course of the next few years just fighting. Until eventually Nkomo agreed to unite and like the unite with Zimbabwe, and the fighting ended. But the downside is Mugabe is like still kind of in power disputedly. Like that guy is still in power today. So it's interesting. It's kind of like, even though he was elected like decades ago.
Yeah. Is Zimbabwe the one where they printed off like $1 million bill or whatever?
$1 trillion bill, but yes.
$1 trillion. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Hyperinflation. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah.
They took over.
That
I don't know. It's such a complicated
food shortages. Issue. Yeah. It's again, like this is a tough one because like it's relatively recent. A lot of people have some really strong opinions of it. a lot of people were around and alive when this happened. So like a lot of people have like living people like have like accounts of it, and it's kind of like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing though, is like, how do you touch a subject where it's obviously, I think Gandhi had a quote, he's like, I think it was Gandhi, where he said, people would rather rule themselves in terrible conditions, or, as like, the country being bad rather than being in a prosperous country ruled by others, which I think is generally true, but it's also, practically speaking, man, like Zimbabwe really screwed the pooch and just went into disarray. But I thought you were going to mention, what's his name? Cecil Rhodes, the guy the country's named after, who literally created the country as just like a dude explorer, was like, I own this country, and like was like,
yeah, I
owns
want
like
to
all the
keep it more, like-
diamonds of the world or something like that, like some crazy. That's
I
what I
wanna
thought you
keep
were
it-
gonna start off with. I was
no,
like,
I was
how
gonna
did
try to
this
keep it just
country get
Bush
invented?
War. I was trying to like focus on the Bush War, but you had to set up a little bit. I didn't want to go too far into the weeds for that.
Oh man, like that guy was insane. Like he literally went into Africa and was like, he created Rhodesia. It's named after him.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I own this. And then they were like, no, you don't.
And then
It's like when that
Britain's
one
like,
guy
yes,
went to
you do.
Latin America, and he's like, I'm the like king or emperor or whatever of Nicaragua. he just went over there with like a militia or something and was like, I'm gonna just take over. And he actually did take over one of the cities at one point, and just was like, I'm gonna be the ruler now. But that didn't last. So
Never
Yeah.
does.
Well,
all right. We'd like to thank China again for this wonderful episode.
yes, thank you.
And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Yes.
Sweet.
Well, everybody, that was the podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed the stories on Africa and Africans. It's crazy how an African became a samurai in Japan. I'm sure he didn't see his life going that way, but what a great story. It's also crazy how Mansa Musa was so rich that he spent so much money, so much gold, that they literally put him on a map to represent Mali and Mali's importance in the gold market. And the tragic story of Rhodesia that continues today, and hopefully will get better. But anyway, find us on Spotify and YouTube at A Good Story. Till next time.